For my wedding, my mom promised she'd be there, no matter what. The morning of, she texted that she couldn't come, then shared photos from my ex's engagement party. After I posted a picture laughing with my in-laws, my phone wouldn't stop blowing up. Hey Reddit. I'm 34F, and I just got married last month. I've been sitting with this knot in my stomach ever since, and writing it out is maybe the only way I can start untangling it. I'm not even sure where to begin, except that what happened still doesn't feel completely real. This is one of those stories that creeps up on you slowly. At first, it's little things easy to dismiss. Then, all of a sudden, it crashes down and you're standing in the middle of a moment you never thought would actually happen. That's what this felt like. I should probably start with my mom. Her name is Celeste, and growing up, she was the kind of mom who had a different tone for every situation. There was her greeting voice, soft and sweet and carefully measured, the one she used on neighbors and teachers. Then there was the colder voice, the clipped, disappointed one that crept in when I wore something she didn't approve of or made a choice she thought reflected poorly on her. That one could shrink you down in an instant. Celeste was all about appearances. She ironed her napkins. She wore perfume to take out the trash. Her hair was never out of place, and if it ever was, it became my fault for not telling her. She smiled in photos like nothing ever cracked underneath, and for years I thought that was just how mothers were. They had to be perfect, and you had to help them stay that way. My father left when I was in middle school, and from that point on, Celeste and I were a unit, or at least that's how she wanted people to see us. She'd talk about how it's just been the two of us, taking on the world, but in private, she made sure I never forgot what she'd sacrificed for me. She never missed a chance to remind me that she could have had a different life if it hadn't been for my dad, or that she could have been traveling the world if not for having to be the responsible one. I spent most of my teen years trying to be easy to manage, easy to be proud of. I got good grades. I picked a college close to home. I dated the kind of person she approved of, even when deep down, I knew something didn't feel right. That person was Will. Will and I dated for almost 7 years. We met in college. He was the kind of guy who everyone liked. He had this calm, collected way of speaking that made people take him seriously. He came from a long line of dentists, no, really, and had this whole future already mapped out. He liked order, routines, and being the one with the final say. He'd tell me my shoes looked a little loud, or that maybe I'd feel more comfortable if I toned down the lipstick. And I would nod and smile, because at the time, I didn't have the words for what was happening. Celeste adored Will. She would light up when he walked into the room. She told me once, completely unprompted, he's the kind of man who makes a woman look better just by being next to her. I remember feeling a weird chill when she said that, but I brushed it off. Looking back, it's clear she was more invested in him than in me. I ended things with Will when I was 29. It wasn't dramatic, just a quiet realization that I didn't feel like myself when I was with him. He didn't take it well, and neither did my mom. She cried when I told her. Not in a supportive way, but like I'd just thrown away her favorite heirloom. She didn't ask how I was feeling. She didn't ask if I was okay. She just whispered, "Do you understand what you're giving up?" and then hung up the phone. For a while after that, things between us were cold. Holidays felt forced. She would talk about Will in past tense, like he'd died. He used to be so thoughtful, she'd say at dinner, completely unprovoked. Or she'd sigh when I mentioned dating again and say, well, it's going to be hard to top him. Then I met Dan. Dan is everything Will wasn't. He's patient, warm, and so authentically himself that it makes you want to stop pretending, too. He's a high school English teacher, the kind who gets thank you letters from students years after they graduate. He reads poetry before bed. He builds bookshelves in his spare time. He's not flashy, and he doesn't come from some big, impressive family. But he sees me in a way I didn't realize I'd been missing. Celeste, of course, was unimpressed. The first time she met him, she smiled like she was trying to pass a dental exam. When Dan complimented her cooking, she said, "Thank you. We'll always like this dish too." At our second dinner together, she asked Dan what his career trajectory looked like, and when he said he was happy teaching, she tilted her head and said, "That's sweet. I suppose some people are fulfilled by service." I told myself she just needed time, that she'd come around once she saw how happy I was, that mothers needed a minute to adjust. I gave her a minute. I gave her 3 years. When Dan proposed last fall, I hesitated before calling her. I wanted to tell her, of course I did, but a part of me also braced for impact. To my surprise, she actually sounded excited. She offered to help with the venue. She even cried when I showed her the dress. For the first time in a long time, I thought, Maybe she really is happy for me. I should have looked closer. In the months leading up to the wedding, she was involved, but in that hands-on from a distance way. She'd suggest things over the phone, but rarely showed up. She said she was trying not to step on toes. I bought it. I wanted to believe she was giving me space. When she missed the tasting at the vineyard, she sent a long text about not feeling well and told me to take photos. Dan was more skeptical. "She's not coming, Lila," he said one night, not unkindly. "I don't think she's planning to be there." I laughed it off. "She wouldn't miss my wedding," I said. "She promised." Because she did promise. In fact, she told me twice that she'd be there, no matter what. The way she said it made me tear up because it felt like something had healed between us. But the week of the wedding, things started to slip. She didn't answer my calls. Said she was tying up loose ends. I asked if she needed help with travel plans. She brushed it off. I offered to book her a hotel room near the venue. She told me she had it covered. By the time the rehearsal dinner rolled around, I hadn't heard from her in almost 4 days. The night before the wedding, I sat on the edge of the bed, dress hanging in the next room, phone in my lap. I stared at it for what felt like an hour before texting. "Hi, just wanted to check in. Is everything okay? Please let me know if you're still coming tomorrow. I love you." No response. The next morning, as I sat with my hair half pinned and the makeup artist laying out brushes beside me, my phone buzzed. I didn't even hesitate. I grabbed it like a lifeline. It was her. A text. Just a text. No call. No voice. "Hey, sweetheart. I'm so sorry, but I can't come today. Something's come up. I hope you understand. Sending love." That's all it said. I stared at the screen. I think I read it 5 times before I even reacted. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat there, cold, while the makeup artist asked if I needed a moment. Then, maybe 2 hours later, while I was putting on my dress, of all things, my cousin sent me a photo. A group picture. Smiling faces. My mother. Wearing pearls. Standing beside my ex, Will. And that was only the first photo. There were more photos. One showed her standing beneath a garland of ivory balloons and gold streamers, smiling wider than I'd seen her smile in years. Another showed her holding a small square box, like a gift, her eyes bright and focused on the person holding the camera. That person, I later realized, was Will. At first, I thought maybe it was old. Maybe someone had posted a memory, a throwback. But then I saw the caption beneath one of them, posted by a mutual acquaintance who'd always hovered around my mother's social circle. "So happy to celebrate Will and Marianne's engagement today. What a beautiful afternoon." Will and Marianne. The name hit like a slow echo. Marianne was someone he'd worked with, someone I barely remembered from a hospital gala years ago. I vaguely recalled her hovering behind him during small talk, smiling too tightly at my jokes. She always seemed polite, if a little too interested. Back then, I brushed it off. But here she was, wearing a white lace tea dress, standing arm in arm with the man I once thought I'd marry. And standing beside them both was my mother. She hadn't just missed my wedding. She had chosen to be at his engagement party instead. At first, I didn't know what to feel. It was like my emotions couldn't get in through the door. Shock, mostly. Then confusion. Then something sharper, a kind of dull, slow burn betrayal that made it hard to breathe. Dan found me sitting on the edge of the bed, still holding my phone. His brow furrowed, and he crouched down in front of me, gently taking the phone from my hand. He read the message, then looked at me. "Lila, she didn't come because of this?" I didn't say anything. I couldn't. I remember just shaking my head, once, then again, until he wrapped his arms around me and held me there in silence. He didn't ask questions. He didn't tell me what to feel. He just stayed there while I tried to keep my mascara from running. But the real unraveling didn't start until after the ceremony. That day, I pushed through with something like tunnel vision. I smiled when I needed to. I said my vows clearly. I danced with my new father-in-law, who told me I looked like peace in a dress, which almost made me cry again. Dan was perfect. Steady. Present. He never let go of my hand. It was everything I hoped it would be. Except for her. We didn't do a huge post on social media, but a few guests posted photos, some of us laughing by the arbor, some candids during speeches. I posted a single picture the next morning, me laughing with Dan's mother, who had hugged me and said she'd always wanted a daughter. The photo was light and full of movement, my head tilted back, her hand on mine. I liked it because it looked like joy. That post changed everything. Within an hour, my phone started buzzing. Texts from numbers I didn't recognize. Messages from old family friends. Some polite, some not. One message said, "Wow, guess you're fine burning bridges now." Another, "Your mother was heartbroken. I hope you're proud." Even my aunt, who I hadn't spoken to in years, commented, "Some people forget who raised them. Glad Celeste has people who care about her." I was stunned. It was like I'd walked into a room full of whispers that had been going on without me for months, maybe years. And at the center of it all was Celeste. I tried to call her again, just once, straight to voicemail. Later that night, my cousin, the same one who sent me the first photo, called me quietly from her car. She sounded nervous, her voice hushed like she was afraid someone might overhear. "Lila, I think you should know what happened." She told me that Celeste had been involved in the engagement party planning, not just attending, helping, hosting. She had picked the flowers and suggested the venue, Will's parents' country house, no less. She had helped Mary and pick out the cake. And this was the part that made my chest ache. She had given a speech. She said something about some matches just making more sense, my cousin whispered, and about how it was nice to see Will with someone who shared his values. People clapped. I just sat there, staring at the darkened ceiling of our honeymoon suite, trying to imagine it. My mother, giving a toast at my ex's engagement party on the day I married the man I loved. It wasn't just that she didn't come to the wedding. It was that she chose that moment, my moment, to make a statement, to send a message. And she wasn't finished yet. After that call from my cousin, I felt like I was waking up inside a nightmare. But the strangest thing was how calm I suddenly became. Like the shock of it all peeled away whatever doubt I'd been holding on to and left something cold and clear in its place. I knew then that this wasn't just about my mom being selfish or hurt. This was deliberate, calculated. She had made a choice, and that choice was a betrayal on purpose. I spent the next few days moving through everything carefully. I didn't want to react in anger or confusion, because I knew from experience with her that any emotional response would just be twisted and used against me later. Instead, I started quietly collecting evidence. I went back through old messages, texts I hadn't paid much attention to before. The ones where she asked about Will in ways that felt more like checking in than innocent curiosity. I asked around very carefully, not about her, but about Will's engagement party. I confirmed the details. Who organized it, who was there, who spoke. One person, Marianne's sister, was unexpectedly helpful. She seemed uneasy about how much Celeste had inserted herself into their plans, as if she didn't quite trust her intentions either. Marianne herself was polite but distant when I reached out, though she clearly wanted to keep things cordial with my mother. What hurt more than anything was the silence from Celeste. I sent one carefully worded message after another, asking if she was okay, if we could talk, if she regretted missing the wedding. No reply. Then I started hearing from my family. My aunts, uncles, cousins. Some sent subtle messages of support, but most either ignored me or echoed what my mom had been saying behind my back, that I had blown things out of proportion or that I was too sensitive. One distant cousin even suggested maybe Dan wasn't good enough for me, though I ignored that message entirely. It became clear that Celeste was not just refusing to acknowledge what she'd done, she was actively turning the family against me. I could have given in. I could have apologized for feeling hurt. I could have pretended everything was fine and kept smiling for everyone else's sake. But I knew I had to take control of this story. That's when I started planning. The first thing I did was to reach out to a few people who had supported me all along. Dan's family, my closest friends, a few trusted relatives. I shared the truth with them slowly, carefully, without emotion. I showed them the photos, the texts, the messages from my cousin. They didn't need convincing. They were shocked and angry for me, but mostly they just wanted to help. Next, I decided to take the narrative out of my mother's hands. At the next family gathering, I arrived with a quiet confidence I hadn't had in years. I didn't make any grand speeches or accusations. Instead, I let the facts speak for themselves. I brought a printed photo album. Not the usual wedding pictures, but the candid shots, me with Dan, with his family, laughing and relaxed. Then I showed them the photos from the engagement party, the ones with my mother smiling next to Will and Marianne. I asked questions instead of making statements. Did anyone know she'd been involved in this party while telling me she'd be at my wedding? Does anyone think it's normal for a mother to put her ex's life above her own daughter's happiest day? Some family members shifted uncomfortably. Others avoided eye contact. But what surprised me most was how many quietly admitted they hadn't known. They hadn't seen the photos. They hadn't heard what had really happened. The next move was subtle but effective. I started updating my social media, not with angry posts or public callouts, but with genuine, warm pictures of my life with Dan. Photos of us hosting friends, of my little garden that Dan helped me plant, of quiet mornings with coffee and books. The kind of posts that show a life full of love and stability. And then, at just the right moment, I shared one photo from the wedding day itself, the one where I'm laughing with Dan's mother, completely at ease and truly happy. The caption was simple, surrounded by love on the best day of my life. Within minutes, the messages started pouring in again. But this time, they were different. People who had been silent started reaching out privately, apologizing, offering support, even asking if I was okay. And my phone, well, it didn't stop buzzing. But instead of bitterness, it was filled with people who finally saw the truth. I haven't heard from Celeste since the day of the wedding. I'm not sure if she'll ever reach out. But I know this much. I'm no longer waiting for her approval. Yet, somehow, I can't shake the feeling that this isn't over. Because last week, a package arrived at my door. No return address. Inside was a delicate porcelain box, the kind you keep jewelry in, and a single card with one word on it. Remember. That package shook me more than anything before it. The porcelain box was beautiful but fragile, and the card, just one word, remember, felt like a warning. I didn't know what to expect when I opened it. Inside was a necklace. Simple, elegant, but unmistakably the same one my mother had given me when I was 16, the one I had always thought symbolized our bond, her promise to always be there for me. Now it felt like a cruel reminder of everything she'd broken. I sat with it in my hands, feeling a mix of sadness and resolve. It was a message, no doubt, but I wasn't going to let it scare me or make me doubt myself. I called Dan that night and told him everything. We talked about what this could mean, if it was a threat, a sign she was watching, or maybe just a desperate attempt to get my attention. Either way, Dan reminded me I wasn't alone. He promised that no matter what came next, we'd face it together. In the weeks after, I blocked her number. I stopped trying to reach her. And slowly, the tension in my life began to ease. The family members who had sided with her either drifted away or started reaching out on my terms. I wasn't interested in those half-hearted reconciliations, but I appreciated the ones who stayed loyal to me. At the next family event, this time on Dan's side, I was surrounded by people who celebrated me for who I was, not who my mother wanted me to be. And for the first time, I realized how much I'd been carrying the weight of her expectations alone. My mother? She never showed up. Not after that day, not at any point since. No calls, no texts, no emails, no attempts to explain, no awkward messages filled with vague apologies or excuses. Just silence. A silence so complete it felt almost deliberate, like a wall she had built to keep me out forever. The porcelain box she sent was the last thing I ever received from her. It was so fragile, so delicate, and yet it carried the weight of everything we'd lost. The necklace inside was the same one she had given me when I was 16. Back then, I thought it was a symbol of her love, a promise she'd always be there for me, no matter what. Now, with all that had happened, it felt like a bitter reminder of that promise broken beyond repair. I kept the box on my dresser for a long time, untouched except for when I'd pick it up and stare at it, trying to understand why someone who called herself a mother could turn so cold. After sending that, she didn't try to reach me again. It was like she had made her choice, drawn her line in the sand, and left me to figure out where I stood. It was cruel, yes, but also freeing. Because with that silence, I realized something important. I was finally free. Free from the pressure to be what she wanted me to be. Free from trying to fit into the narrow mold she had shaped for me my entire life. Free from the endless cycle of hoping she'd change, hoping she'd come back, hoping that maybe, just maybe, our relationship could be salvaged. In the months that followed, I began to rebuild, not just my life with Dan, but my identity. For years, I had been living in the shadow of my mother's expectations, constantly trying to earn her approval that never came. Every decision I made felt weighed down by the fear of disappointing her. But now, that weight was lifted. I started pursuing things I loved without worrying about what she would think. I took a pottery class, something I'd always wanted to do but never dared mention because it seemed frivolous in her eyes. I volunteered at a local animal shelter. I reconnected with old friends I had drifted away from because she disapproved. Each small step was a piece of me coming back to life. And through it all, Dan was my anchor. His support was quiet but unwavering. He never pushed me to move faster or act differently. He simply held my hand and reminded me that I was enough just as I was. When I doubted myself, he was there with words of encouragement. When I cried over what I lost, he held me close. In every way, he was the family I had chosen, the family I needed. Of course, the absence of my mother left a hole. There were moments, especially on holidays or birthdays, when the silence was deafening. Friends and relatives would ask about her, and I'd give the same honest answer: she's not part of my life right now. The questions that followed were often awkward or sympathetic, but over time, people accepted it. I didn't have to explain or justify my feelings anymore. I'm not sure if I'll ever hear from Celeste again. Part of me wonders if she'll reach out one day, hoping for reconciliation. But honestly, I don't think I want that. The damage she caused wasn't a sudden accident. It was a slow unraveling marked by choices that made it clear where her loyalties lay. And I don't believe she's capable of the kind of apology or change that would matter to me now. The day she chose my ex's engagement party over my wedding wasn't just a moment of hurt. It was a turning point. Everything that came after, the silence, the manipulation, the attempts to turn family against me, was fallout from that choice. It was when I stopped being her daughter and started being someone she resented. But I refused to let that resentment define me. So now, I'm moving forward. Slowly, steadily, with Dan by my side and the people who truly care about me. We've created a circle of support that feels like home. We laugh together, we celebrate small victories, and we share quiet moments of contentment that I once thought impossible. And that, after all the drama and heartbreak, feels like the real beginning. It's not perfect. Healing rarely is. Sometimes the past creeps in unexpectedly: a memory, a phone notification I delete without opening, a sudden pang of sadness. But each time, I remind myself of the life I'm building. One rooted in love, respect, and mutual support. One where I'm no longer trying to prove my worth to someone who refused to see it. And as the days go by, I feel stronger, more whole, more me. That's the story I want to live. The story I'm choosing now. Because in the end, family isn't always about blood. Sometimes it's about who stands by you when the rest walk away. And that makes all the difference.